Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the online information training entitled ANA's 2020 FOAs, What You Need to Know. This webinar is intended for potential applicants. The webinar is presented by the Alaska Region Training and Technical Assistance Center, and we are glad you could join us. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on the ANA website shortly. The Administration for Native Americans, or ANA, is a U.S. federal agency with a mission to promote self-sufficiency for Native Americans, Alaska Natives, and Pacific Islanders by promoting discretionary grant funding for community-based projects and training and technical assistance to eligible tribes and Native organizations. ANA envisions a nation where all Native communities are thriving.
Charles, you might want to check your audio.
Are you guys able to hear me clearly?
That's a little better, I think. Thank you.
Before we begin today's session, I am honored to be able to introduce Ms. Mia Strickland, who will deliver a few opening remarks on behalf of ANA. As the Director of the Division of Program Operations, Mia works with the program specialist to monitor ANA's portfolio of grantees and also manages the annual new award process. Mia Strickland played an integral role in coordinating and overseeing the drafting of the updated FOAs in coordination with a team of dedicated and talented ANA staff members. She has more than 20 years of professional experience in grants management and financial policy or financial assistance. Previously held positions in the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Office of the Secretary. She has gained invaluable experience in grants management and operations while working in the private sector at the American Indian Higher Education Consortium, a nonprofit organization representing the nation's tribal colleges and universities, and also a government contractor that supported the grant award process for multiple federal agencies. She is a member of the Lumbee Tribe of North Carolina. Thank you, Mia, for providing a few words of insight about today's ANA's exciting new funding opportunity announcements, as well as kicking off this year's grant application season. Mia, would you like to talk real quick?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for that kind introduction, Charles. On behalf of Commissioner Jeannie Hovland, I send greetings from Washington, D.C. to all the webinar participants and prospective applicants for ANA's FY20 funding opportunity announcements. I trust everyone is in good spirits and health as our country is facing this current COVID-19 pandemic. In my role at ANA, I oversee the grant award process, which includes the new awards as well as the active 185 grant awards. And I do this with the support of 12 wonderful program specialists. The publication of our annual funding opportunity announcements, or FOAs, is just one step in the funding cycle, but it also drives the rest of our work for the entire year. ANA was thrilled to finally publish our FY20 FOAs earlier this month, although that was a little later than we had originally planned, but it wasn't for lack of effort. ANA staff began working on this year's FOAs in the fall to fine-tune and clarify its requirements to allow applicants to plan and strategize the implementation of stronger project designs. Since 2018, ANA made a paradigm shift to move away from the problem or the need and deficit base to, oh, woe is me way of thinking and framing a project. Instead, we know our communities are resilient and strong in so many ways. We also know our Native communities have a vision of where they want to be and what they want to achieve. The ANA project framework, which is now incorporated into the approach, allows the applicant to shape their project around their long-term community goal, tell us what specific conditions are present, articulate the project goal to be achieved, and identify what will be changed in the community as an outcome. We've deliberately crafted the ANA project framework so that the components logically align with all the required application elements. And we also ensure that the project description correlates with the evaluation criteria. Therefore, if something is asked for in the beginning of the application, the project description, there's a respective evaluation criteria for the reviewers to assess how well the applicant responded. ANA is authorized in statute, the Native American Programs Act of 1974, also known as NAPA, gives us the authority to make financial assistance awards to Native communities. We're also required to provide notice to the public when we have changes in policy or how we administer our programs. So ANA fulfills this requirement by publishing a notice of public comment in the Federal Register on December 27, 2019, where we identified the changes that ANA proposed to make in our FY20 FOAs. We also published an additional NOPAC for the Esther Martinez Immersion Program on February 6, 2020, after Congress reauthorized ME to allow for up to 5 years of program funding instead of the mandatory 36. The full extent of all of our changes are now available in our published FOAs, which can be found on grants.gov. With input from ANA program specialists, impact evaluators, and our TTA providers, ANA had a team of FOA drafters that worked diligently to draft these FY20 FOAs. As the lead for this year's FOA changes, I would like to acknowledge the FOA drafting team, which included program specialists Jill Kane, Lee Allen, Mary Hicks, and Sydney Hurst from the Division of Program Operations. And from the Division of Program Evaluation and Planning, also known as PEP, the team members included Christy Seinold and Brent Huggins, with support from PEP Director Amy Zukowski and our Training and Technical Assistance Coordinator Mark Allender. Drafting 5 different documents that received numerous edits through the approval process is no small task, so they should all be commended for their dedication to the effort. The team's goal was to strengthen the applications and get results-oriented projects by aligning the project description to the evaluation criteria, reducing redundancy, fine-tuning the project framework, and providing greater structure for scoring to ensure more equitable distribution of point values during the panel review process. It was our sincere goal to make the ANA grant application process easier. The first application deadline for our FOAs is in 67 days, June 1st, for our language awards, which have a project start date of July 1. So no decision has been made at this time if the due dates will be extended. I recommend that you subscribe to the opportunity on grants.gov if you haven't already, so that you will be automatically notified if that date changes. Best of luck to all of you, and now back to Charles.
Thank you, Mia. As Mia mentioned, my name is Charles. So, Sinait Las, my name is Charles Peel, and I am the host of today's webinar. I have worked with the Alaska region for going on 7 years in a multitude of roles. I served as a peer advisor, outreach and technology specialist, which I am here today, and I was also at one point the technical assistance manager. I have assisted in the delivery of project planning and development trainings, the pre-application trainings, and at one point I was the lead organizer for providing the technical assistance for a brief time. I am Hadas, or Haida, from Heidelberg, Alaska. So, you guys have mentioned or heard me talking a little bit today, and in today's webinar, we're looking to focus on ANA's newly published funding opportunity announcements, or the FOAs, which kick off this year's 90-day application period. This webinar is being done into that time frame, so that 90-day application window has already started. To help you apply for an ANA grant, this training will focus on 3 primary objectives: providing an overview of the 5 ANA funding opportunity announcements, understanding the changes to the 2020 FOAs, and the review of the new FOA content requirements. ANA has 5 FOAs, our funding opportunity announcements, that being SEDS, which is the Social and Economic Development Strategies, SEDS AK, the Social and Economic Development Strategies for Alaska, P&M, the Native Language Preservation and Maintenance, Esther Martinez Immersion, and the Environmental Regulatory Enhancement. A little bit about SEDS. SEDS is a Social and Economic Development Strategies program which is designed to support community-based projects that increase the ability of Native Americans to define and achieve their own economic and social goals and or the capacity to exercise local control and decision-making to promote the interests of community members. SEDS AK is to provide funding for projects designed to enhance governance and programmatic management capacity for Alaska Native villages. Governance is defined as the exercise of local control and decision-making through duly constituted institutions or tribal governments, the development and enforcement of laws and regulations, codes, and policies that reflect and promote the interests of community members, and the planning and development of social services or economic programs that meet the needs of the community. Preservation and maintenance. The purpose of this program is to assist Native Americans to ensure the survival and the vitality of Native American languages. ANA supports locally determined projects that achieve community goals through specific measurable outcomes in an effort to perpetuate Native language preservation efforts for Native communities. The purpose of the Esther Martinez program is to provide financial assistance to community-driven projects designed to preserve Native American languages through Native American language nests and Native American language survival schools. It is important to note that EMI has certain eligibility requirements that preservation and maintenance doesn't. To be eligible, your tribe or organization must provide documentation that you have at least 3 years of experience operating and administrating Native American language nests, language school, or any other educational program. In addition, you must meet one of the following requirements. You are a Native American language nest, site-based education with at least 5 children under the age of 7, and at least 500 hours of Native language instruction per child. Or you're a Native American survival school. You must also provide site-based education with at least 500 hours of Native language instruction per child. Must be the principal place of instruction for at least 10 students, and must teach math, reading, and sciences in Native languages, and located in areas with high percentage of Native students. The ERE program is designed to support projects that plan, develop, and implement initiatives designed to improve the capacity of the governing body of an Indian tribe or to regulate environmental quality pursuant to federal and tribal environmental laws. The ERE program enhances the ability of tribal governments to provide effective stewardship over lands, waters, and air of their Native communities. ANA, therefore, is interested in supporting locally designed projects that strengthen the environmental regulatory programs in a manner consistent with the goals of the tribal and Alaska Native communities. A total of 68 awards are expected in this year's funding cycle, and this is how it breaks down. There is if you go into each of the funding opportunity announcements, this is going to be in the introduction. SEDS is expecting 33 awards with a funding pool of $8.6 million and a start date for projects of September 30th. SEDS AK is expecting 6 awards with a funding pool of $1 million and a start date of September 30th. Language preservation and maintenance has an expected number of awards of 15 with a total funding pool of $2.5 million. with a start date of July 1. Similar for EMI, expected number of awards is 8, 1.5 million, start date of July 1. And ERE is an expected number of awards of 6 with 1 million funding pool and a start date of September 30th. Before we get into the policy changes, let's take a minute to review this application's timeline. This year's application period is for a length of approximately 90 days following the publication of the FOA in March. The 90-day application period brings us to a June 1 due date for preservation and maintenance, SEDS AK, EMI, and ERE, and June 15th due date for SEDS applications. Please plan to have your applications timestamped before the deadlines at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time Zone. A 2-panel review session is being planned for this summer. These are being worked and developed to provide peer review of as a part of the panel review process. Both preservation and maintenance and EMI will have project start dates of July 1, and SEDS AK and ERE will have project start dates September 30th. We will now turn it back over to Mia to review the changes for the 2020 FOAs.
Thanks, Charles. In order to make the ANA grant application process easier for eligible applicants, we have made the following changes. You need to go to the next slide. ANA requested and received a waiver to exempt applicants from the ACF standard 2-file upload requirement when applying to all FY 2020 ANA FOAs in order to reduce the technical expertise and software required to combine multiple documents and files into only 2 files. The 150-page limit remains in effect. ANA wanted to make the OWP form easier to load as part of the grant application. I think you need to forward the next slide. Therefore, the OWP is an optional form in the application packages for each FOA. This technical change will allow applicants to submit the OWP form in whatever way is easiest for them. ANA's OWP form is available on the grants.gov website, as well as in the application toolkit, which can be found on the ANA website. Although the form will still be required as part of a complete application, this change will help applicants to submit the form in whatever version they utilize to prepare their application, rather than requiring them to use the grants.gov version. Also, ANA staggered our publication and closing dates this year. We published P&M, SEDS Alaska, and ERE on March 2nd. A week later, we published ME after the NOPAC comment period had expired, and then SEDS, which has 2 weeks after the first FOAs were published. This will allow applicants to be able to be responsive to more than one grant competition. Next is the application requirements and criteria. As previously mentioned, in 2018, ANA made substantial revisions to the application requirements and evaluation criteria included in our FOAs. To remain consistent with our application requirements and structure, ANA has moved the ANA project framework, which was previously under expected outcomes, into the approach section. And ANA will have evaluation criteria for our approach section, which will be 76 points, 12 points for the organizational capacity, and 12 points for the line item budget and justification. ANA revised the evaluation criteria to 3 of the criterion while reassigning and streamlining the sub-criteria from previous years. While a majority of the review criterion remain the same as last year, be aware some criteria have been edited to improve clarity and reduce redundancy. There are also changes in the scoring of the evaluation criteria, which provide smaller point allotments for each sub-criteria. These changes are meant to streamline the information required for a successful grant application, as well as provide more specific point allotments in order to make ANA's evaluation criteria more approachable. In addition, it's intended to provide greater guidance to panel reviewers on how to allocate their scores. ANA Commissioner Jeannie Hovland has identified several priority areas that she would like to potentially fund through this program. 5 bonus points will be available for applications that address one of the following priority areas: Native elders, Native veterans, Native first responders, murdered and missing Indigenous women, and/or anti-human trafficking. Applications that address one or more of these priority areas should be reflected in the project goal, all objectives, indicator, and target population, either as the participants or beneficiaries. Reviewers will provide 5 points if all elements are included in the application to address one or more priority areas. In addition, the program areas of interest were expanded to include opportunity zones under economic competitiveness, as well as smoking, native farming, and vaping under substance abuse prevention. In SEDS Alaska, ANA modified the description of the program purpose to expand the program areas of interest beyond governance. In addition, ANA wants to provide a more competitive advantage for smaller Alaska Native villages or organizations that have never received ANA funding. Therefore, 10 bonus points will be added in the scoring criteria if an eligible entity that has never received an ANA award is applying. ANA staff will confirm during the objective review process whether or not an applicant organization for SEDS Alaska has received a past ANA award. On December 20, 2019, President Trump signed into law the Esther Martinez Native American Languages Programs Reauthorization Act. The statute amended NAPA to allow ANA to set the project period of ME grants for up to 60 months. Because of the complexity of language grants that provide immersion instruction, and because Native American communities are most knowledgeable about their language programs and the length of time necessary to implement them, ANA has determined to use this new authority to give tribes maximum flexibility on the length of their grant and allow the project period in FY20 ME grants to be up to 60 months. Previously, awards were limited to a 36-month budget period. But this year, we will make project period of 36, 48, or 60 months, depending on the applicant's request. In addition, the minimum number of children served was reduced, and that was previously explained earlier. So for ME, the number of children served has been reduced to 5. Previously, it was a minimum of 10. And for our language survival schools, it was previously 15, and it has been reduced to 10. The other change here is that both language nests as well as survival schools must provide certification that the organization has not less than 3 years of experience in operating and administering a Native American language survival school, nest, or other educational program. So in our ERE FOA, we have clarified, based on statute and regulations, that federal funds are allowed to be used as cost share or matching funds only for an ERE project, as long as they are not provided from another ANA grant. However, before using federal grant funds as matching, grantees must make sure that the authorizing statute for the matching federal grant specifically allows it to be used as cost share or match. ANA will also permit eligible entities to apply for ERE grants even if they do not own land. There's no requirement within the provision of ERE that requires an eligible entity to own land. And then, so next is just the general overview of all the FOA content changes in the various sections. So one of the best guidance or tips we give applicants is to know the FOA inside and out. To assist you, we will break down any changes to the FOA content in this next section. Each ANA grant program competition is tied to a funding announcement. While each agency has the opportunity to provide unique information and criteria related to their specific FOA, the structure and format of all federal FOAs follow an Office of Management and Budget approved structural outline as seen on this slide. There are 8 parts of each FOA. Again, all federal funding follow the same format and structure. Section 1 always includes a program description and describes the program areas of interest, and also for ANA, we include in this section ANA's administrative policies, such as required travel, limitations on the number of awards, conflict of interest standards, and compliance with background checks. In Section 2, the federal award amount changes and includes information on the number of awards, what the award ceiling is, project start date, and length of projects. Section 3 includes information about eligibility, information on non-federal share, a list of projects ineligible for funding, and application disqualification factors. Section 4, application and submission information, is one of the sections that you will focus on, and more specifically, Section 4.2, which includes the project description. This section contains a lot of information, including application formatting requirements, electronic application submission instructions, a table of required forms, assurances, and certifications, as well as the project description, which details the application's content. The project description is a section that you will need to read thoroughly to understand exactly what information is to be included in an application. In Section 5, application review information is the section that reviewers will use during the panel review process. And as applicants, you will find this section helpful to use when writing your application. Specifically, Section 5.1, the review criteria. This section contains evaluation criteria and the point values attributed to each criteria. Many reviewers will score applications only based on the criteria outlined in this section. And then in Section 6, the Federal Award Administration information covers how applicants will be notified of their award, in addition to administrative and national policy requirements and grantee reporting requirements. Section 7 includes agency contact information. Section 8 contains a list of helpful resources and websites, as well as an application checklist. We also include an appendix at the end of the FOA that contains definitions and templates. So I'll go through the highlights of some of the changes in the various sections. In Section 1, Program Description, ANA moved a lot of content to this section in order to help applicants understand up front what all of the application requirements were, as well as the support before they begin making a decision to apply. So we added information up in this section that ANA provides free training and technical assistance to potential applicants through pre-application training workshops and a manual. The TTA trainings, which include webinars and an ANA grant application toolkit, are designed to encourage potential applicants to seek further guidance in developing and submitting their grant application. The trainings are provided through 4 regional training and technical assistance centers. Also in this section for the SEDS FOA, we added the priority areas, which I previously described. We also, in order to make the FOA a little less large, we added a hyperlink instead of a long list to provide a full list of our program areas of interest under the SEDS program. And as I mentioned, we added a few new areas, including opportunity zones, native traditional farming, as well as smoking and vaping prevention. Also in this section, we added a subheader for key application features to highlight the critical information required from applicants. The changes in this section are necessary to enable potential applicants to assess their organizational capacity to meet the requirements of a FOA before getting too deep in the application process. We added the required application components in this section in order to show all required parts of a completed application. And then for eligibility, this section was updated to make clearer who the eligible applicants are, as well as including specific disqualification factors such as the assurance of community representation on the board of directors and only one active award per CFDA number. The clarifications in this section are necessary to minimize the number of applications that are disqualified as part of the application screening process because they for lack of compliance with the required information or formatting. And then for submission, I think I'm on the next slide, or maybe. As mentioned earlier, the clause requiring a two-file format has been amended to exempt ANA applications from the ACF two-file requirement. This change is very significant to the application process because it will reduce the technical expertise and software required to combine multiple documents and files into only two files. Previously, applications that included more than two files had to have the excess files removed from the competition. This change will impact about 21% of our applications received in FY 2018 or 2019 that did have to have parts of their application removed. Also, I discussed earlier how the OWP is now optional. Remember, though, the OWP is still required, but how you load it, which version of the OWP you use is up to you. ANA's intent for making these changes was to make the ANA funding easier for our Native communities and more accessible to eligible applicants. So I previously mentioned the changes we made in FY20 to develop a project framework intended to outline the project in a way that focuses long-term community goals toward achievable and measurable project outcomes. So previously, the project framework was part of expected outcomes, but now we've made it as part of the approach. There are three. So we've also adjusted the points accordingly. For the review section, in order to respond to feedback from reviewers and other stakeholders, the application review process includes the evaluation criteria and points factors that have been revised, restructured to reduce redundancy and to improve clarity. Specifically, because we moved the outcomes expected into the approach, we had to, that's why there's so many points this year in the one approach section. The point values have been rearranged to streamline this information required for successful grant application. We reduced the total number of scoring criteria by 12%, and this will simplify the panel review discussion and enhance the reviewer experience. We also provided more detailed information regarding the appeals process to ensure disqualified applicants were aware of their rights. And in the appendix, ANA provided new definitions for target population, project participants, beneficiaries, community to be served, and outcomes. We also defined, based on the priority areas, first responders, Native elders, veterans, anti-human trafficking, and missing and murdered Indigenous women. We also added a new appendix to provide a template for applicants to document the assurance of community representation on the board of directors. This intent was to reduce the number of disqualified applicants who have in the past failed to provide sufficient documentation. So this is what the template looks like. You'll find it in Appendix D of the FOA, and it includes suggested guidance that may be used in submitting the required documentation. This disqualification factor applies only to applicants that are not tribes or Alaska Native villages. So we restate what the assurance policy is in the template so that you'll have the policy right in front of you as a reminder, as well as sample examples of how to include the name, position of the board, and how it meets ANA's 3 categories of community representation. Applicants that do not include this documentation will be considered non-responsive, and the application will not be considered for competition. Keep in mind that public agencies serving the Native peoples from Guam, American Samoa, or the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands must also include this assurance of community representation from the governing body of the applicant agency, and tribal colleges that are governed by their own board that's separate from the governing body of a tribe must also include assurance of community representation from the governing body of the tribal college, not that from the tribe. If a tribe or Alaska Native Village applies for a grant as a nonprofit, the assurance of community representation on a board must also be provided. So that concludes the extent of the FY 2020 FOA changes. Charles, back to you.
Thank you, Mia. And now we will take a look at the resources and information when it comes to the actual submission of your application. So section 4.2, the application submission options, it is vital to know that you need your DUNS number. Obtain it if you do not already have one. Make sure that you know it. And if you do not, talk to your managers to get it. It is also important to remember to register or renew your organization's System for Award Management, or SAM.gov account. If you do not have either of these, you will not be able to submit. And it is also very important to create a grants.gov account, and including authorizing grants.gov roles and creating a workspace. Applications must be submitted through the grants.gov workspace. As it was last year, the electronic submission is required through grants.gov workspace. Workspace is a shared online environment where multiple users are able to access and edit forms for your application. For more information or tutorials on the grants.gov workspace, please go to the grants.gov website. However, if you are an applicant with a limited or no internet access and or limited computer capacity that inhibits you from uploading large files to grants.gov, you may apply for a waiver. For more information on submitting a request, refer to the FOA under the section Request an exemption from required electronic application submission. The deadline to submit the waiver request is April 1st. Additionally, resources such as the 2020 Pre-Application Manual are located on the ANA's website under the Resources tab or following the URL on the slide. You will find a budget template mentioned earlier in the ANA application toolkit, along with other resources to assist you in putting together your application. Due to the rules that govern the Department of Health and Human Services grant award process, we are unable to take questions and answers today on the webinar. But you can direct any questions that you may have to your regional training and technical assistance provider. ANA provides free training and technical assistance to Native communities serving organizations in the 4 regions: the Western Continental U.S., the Eastern Continental U.S., the Alaska region, and the Pacific region, which includes Hawaii, American Samoa, Guam, and the islands of CNMI. ANA recognizes that COVID-19 has impacted the communities across all of the United States. To address the needs of these communities, the Regional Training and Technical Assistance Centers will continue to offer virtual technical assistance. Additionally, each region has been working towards hosting a pre-application virtual training. For more information, please contact your regional TTA center about the dates for which they will be conducting this training. For any questions whatsoever, please contact your regional training and technical assistance center or the agency contacts listed in Section 7 of the FOA for any further assistance. On behalf of the Administration for Native Americans, the Training and Technical Assistance Center, and all of the staff, we would like to thank you for attending this webinar. The webinar has been recorded and will be posted to ANA's website soon.